My name is Nathan, and I just turned 35 years old. If you looked at my life on paper right now, the properties, the companies, the investment portfolios, the private jet membership I barely use because I still feel guilty about the carbon footprint, you'd assume I came from money. You'd assume I had every advantage, every door opened for me, every path smoothed by parents who believed in my potential. You'd be wrong. If that story just had you on the edge of your seat, feeling every moment of Nathan's journey from the spare to the one holding all the cards, then do me a favor right now. Smash that like button, thumbs up so hard your phone feels it. Let me know this story hit different. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you even doing? I came from a family that had money, yes, but none of it was ever meant for me. I was the accident, the afterthought, the spare. And for the first 23 years of my life, I was reminded of that fact every single day. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Stories like this need context. They need you to understand the slow, grinding cruelty that shaped me before you can appreciate how I reshaped myself. So let me take you back to the beginning, to a childhood spent in the shadow of two people who were supposed to be my brothers, but felt more like rivals I was never allowed to compete against. I was born 7 years after my twin brothers, Marcus and Julian. My parents, Richard and Diane Hartwell, had planned their family perfectly. 2 children, both boys, born at the same time for maximum efficiency. They were the kind of people who approached everything strategically, from their careers in finance and corporate law to their social connections to the number of offspring they would produce. Marcus and Julian were the plan. I was the accident. My mother told me this when I was 6 years old, not with malice exactly, but with the casual indifference of someone stating an obvious fact. You weren't supposed to happen, Nathan, but we made the best of it. Making the best of it in their interpretation meant providing me with food, shelter, and the legal minimum of parental attention while pouring every resource they had into my brothers. Marcus and Julian were enrolled in elite private schools. I went to public school. Marcus and Julian had private tutors, music lessons, sports coaches, SAT prep courses. I had a library card and whatever I could teach myself. The justification was always the same. Marcus and Julian were gifted, special, destined for greatness. They had been identified as exceptional from an early age, high IQ scores, natural charisma, the kind of easy confidence that came from knowing you were wanted and valued. I apparently was none of those things. Nathan's a good kid, my mother would say when her friends asked about her children, but he's not like the twins. He's simpler, more suited for ordinary things. Ordinary things, that phrase haunted my childhood like a curse. Every time I brought home an A on a test, it was dismissed as the exception rather than the rule. Every time I showed interest in something, computers, writing, business strategy, it was treated as a phase I'd eventually outgrow. Every time I tried to prove that I was just as capable as my brothers, I was gently, condescendingly reminded that comparisons weren't fair. You're not like them, Nathan, and that's okay. Not everyone can be exceptional. But here's the thing about being told you're ordinary your entire childhood. Either you believe it or you don't. And somewhere deep inside me, in a place that my parents' indifference couldn't reach, I didn't believe it. I couldn't articulate why, couldn't point to any evidence that contradicted their assessment. I just knew, with a certainty that felt more like stubbornness than confidence, that they were wrong about me. So I learned to hide. I learned to keep my head down, to not draw attention, to let them underestimate me. While Marcus and Julian basked in the spotlight, I became a shadow, present but unnoticed, watching everything, learning more than anyone realized. My brothers, for all their supposed gifts, were not particularly kind to me. Marcus, the older twin by 4 minutes, treated me with casual contempt, like I was a pet that had overstayed its welcome. Julian, the younger twin, was more subtle. His cruelty came wrapped in humor, jokes at my expense that everyone laughed at because Julian was charming and I was the punchline. "Hey Nathan, did you finish my homework yet?" Julian would ask in front of his friends, even though I had never once done his homework. The implication was clear. I was useful only for menial tasks, a servant in my own home. "Nathan, grab us some drinks," Marcus would order whenever his friends were over. Not a request, an order. And if I hesitated, the punishment was swift. Weeks of intensified mockery, pranks that bordered on cruelty, my belongings hidden or destroyed. I learned to comply. It was easier than fighting. By the time I was 17, I had perfected the art of invisibility. I got decent grades, not exceptional, because exceptional would draw attention, kept a small circle of friends my family never met, and spent most of my free time in my room, teaching myself things that interested me: programming, financial analysis, market psychology. I had discovered the internet early and recognized its potential when most people still thought it was a fad. I built websites, learned to code, devoured every book about business and investing that the library had. None of this was visible to my family. To them, I was the quiet one, the unremarkable one, the spare who would probably end up in some middling job while Marcus and Julian changed the world. And then came the moment that crystallized everything. It was the summer before my senior year of high school. I had been quietly hopeful about college, not the elite institutions my brothers attended, but a good state school where I could study computer science and finally escape the house that had never felt like home. What I didn't know was that my parents had made plans of their own. The conversation happened on a Sunday evening in my father's study. I had been summoned, which was unusual enough that I felt a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach as I walked in. My parents were sitting together on the leather couch, a united front. My father held a folder in his hands. My mother's expression was sympathetic in that practiced way that always preceded bad news. "Nathan," my father began, "we need to discuss your future." I sat down in the chair across from them, waiting. As you know, Marcus and Julian have been developing their business plans. Marcus's tech venture and Julian's real estate concept. Both are incredibly promising, and we've decided to provide them with seed funding to get started. I nodded slowly, not seeing what this had to do with me. "The thing is," my mother continued, picking up seamlessly, "the capital requirements are significant. We've reviewed our assets, and to fully fund both businesses properly, we need to reallocate some resources." My father opened the folder. Inside, I could see documents with my name on them. "Your college fund," he said. "We've decided to redirect it toward your brother's ventures." The words hung in the air, taking a moment to fully register. "My college fund," I repeated. "It's the practical choice," my mother said quickly. "Marcus and Julian have concrete plans, real potential. The return on investment for their businesses will far exceed the cost of your education. Plus," my father added, "we're not sure college is the right path for you anyway. Your grades are decent, but you've never shown the drive or ambition that your brothers have. Community college, maybe a trade school, those might be more appropriate options." I stared at them, feeling something cold settle in my chest. "You're taking my college money," I said slowly, "to give to Marcus and Julian." "We're making a family investment decision," my father corrected. "This isn't personal, Nathan, it's financial, and when their businesses succeed, which they will, the whole family will benefit." "Including Maze." My parents exchanged a glance. "Well," my mother said carefully, "that depends on the terms of their success and how involved you choose to be in the family. But yes, theoretically, everyone benefits when the family prospers." Theoretically, the word told me everything I needed to know. "And if I say no?" My father's expression hardened. "This isn't a negotiation, Nathan. The money has already been transferred. We're informing you as a courtesy." A courtesy. They had already taken my future without asking, and telling me about it was a courtesy. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. "Is there anything else?" I asked, my voice flat. My mother smiled, apparently relieved that I wasn't making a scene. "No, that's all. Thank you for understanding, Nathan. We knew you'd be mature about this." I walked out of the study, up the stairs, and into my room. I closed the door, sat on my bed, and stared at the wall for a very long time. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. The naive part that had still believed, despite everything, that my parents might eventually see me, really see me, died quietly in that bedroom. What replaced it was harder, colder, more determined. They had taken my college fund. Fine, I would build my own fund. They thought I wasn't capable of anything exceptional. Fine, I would become so exceptional that their dismissal would haunt them forever. They had made me invisible. Fine, I would use that invisibility as a weapon. But I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't rage or cry or beg. I had learned from years of watching and waiting that the best revenge isn't immediate, it's patient, it's strategic. It's the kind that lands when they least expect it, when they're most vulnerable, when there's no possible way for them to spin it in their favor. So I graduated high school, got a job at a local electronics store, and began the long, quiet process of proving everyone wrong. The next 12 years were a study in discipline and deception. On the surface, I was exactly what my family expected, ordinary. I worked retail jobs, moved into a cheap apartment, drove an old car, wore unremarkable clothes. when my parents occasionally invited me to family gatherings, less out of affection than obligation, I played the role perfectly. The quiet one, the underachiever, the spare. "So Nathan," my father would ask, his tone carrying that familiar note of condescension, "still working at the electronics store?" "Yes, sir, just got promoted to assistant manager." "Assistant manager," Marcus would snort, not even trying to hide his amusement. "Congratulations, little brother, really climbing that corporate ladder." Julian would add his own jab. "Hey, if you ever want to actually make something of yourself, I might have some entry-level positions opening up at my company. You could fetch coffee for my executives." Everyone would laugh. My mother would give me a sympathetic look that somehow made it worse, and I would smile, nod, and excuse myself to get another drink. What they didn't see, what no one saw, was what I was building in the shadows. The electronics store job was real, but it wasn't my career. It was cover. The actual work happened in the hours between my shifts and in every free moment I could carve out of my days. I had started with almost nothing, a few $100s saved from birthday gifts over the years, a laptop I'd bought at an employee discount, and an internet connection. But I had something my brothers, for all their advantages, didn't have: hunger. Real hunger, the kind that comes from being told your entire life that you're not enough. My first venture was web development. Companies were just starting to realize they needed websites, and most of them had no idea how to build one. I taught myself HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and eventually more complex programming languages. I built sites for local businesses, charging rates that were low enough to attract clients but high enough to start accumulating capital. Within 2 years, I had saved $30,000, not life-changing money, but enough to take the next step. I started investing. Not blindly. I had spent years studying the markets, understanding patterns, learning from the mistakes of others. I developed a system based on value investing principles, modified for the tech sector that I understood better than most finance professionals. I was cautious, methodical, and patient. By the time I was 25, my portfolio was worth $500,000. I kept working at the electronics store, not because I needed the money, though it helped with living expenses, but because I needed the cover. As long as my family saw me as the assistant manager at a retail chain, they wouldn't ask questions. They wouldn't look closer. They would continue underestimating me, which was exactly what I wanted. At 27, I launched my first real company, a software development firm specializing in enterprise solutions. I founded it under an LLC with a generic name, hired a front man to serve as the public face, and positioned myself as a silent partner. The business grew rapidly, fueled by my technical skills and business acumen. At 30, I sold that company for $18 million. I didn't tell my family. Instead, I used the money to start an investment firm, again, with myself hidden behind layers of corporate structure and trusted intermediaries. The firm focused on early-stage tech investments, and within 3 years, it had become one of the most successful venture capital operations on the East Coast. At 32, my net worth crossed $100 million. At 34, it crossed $300 million. Through all of this, I maintained the facade. When my parents asked about my life, I told them about my promotion to store manager. When my brothers mocked my lack of ambition, I nodded and agreed that I really should do something more with my life. When family gatherings became exercises in humiliation, I endured them with the same quiet patience I had developed as a child. But I was watching, always watching. I watched Marcus's tech company struggle through multiple pivots, burning through investor money with nothing to show for it. I watched Julian's real estate empire expand recklessly, built on leverage and optimism rather than sound fundamentals. I watched my parents pour more and more resources into my brother's failing ventures, convinced that success was just around the corner. I watched and I waited and I prepared. The collapse came faster than even I had anticipated. It started with Julian. His real estate business had been over-leveraged for years, held together by a booming market and an endless supply of cheap credit. When interest rates rose and the market cooled, the whole structure began to crumble. Properties that had been purchased at peak prices suddenly couldn't be sold for half their cost. Tenants defaulted, projects stalled, and the debt payments that had seemed manageable became impossible. Within 6 months, Julian was facing bankruptcy, not just business bankruptcy, personal bankruptcy. He had personally guaranteed so many loans that his own assets were on the line. Marcus wasn't far behind. His tech company had never found product-market fit, pivoting so many times that even the founders couldn't explain what they actually did. The last round of funding had come with harsh terms, and when the company missed its milestones, the investors called their notes. Marcus was facing a hostile takeover that would leave him with nothing. My parents, who had invested heavily in both businesses, watched their retirement savings evaporate. The house they had lived in for 30 years was suddenly at risk, leveraged against loans they had taken to support my brother's ventures. The family that had always seemed so powerful, so confident, so certain of their superiority, they were falling apart. And none of them knew that I was in a position to either save them or destroy them. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening. I was in my actual home, a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, filled with art and comfortable furniture, and all the things I had once thought were reserved for people like my brothers, when my mother's number appeared on my screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Nathan, her voice was strained, carrying a tension I had never heard before. Are you available to talk? Of course, Mom, what's going on? There was a long pause. When she spoke again, I could hear the effort it took to maintain her composure. There's a family meeting this weekend, at the house. We need everyone there. A family meeting about what? Another pause. We're facing some challenges. Your father and I and your brothers. We need to discuss them as a family and figure out next steps. Challenges, a polite word for disaster. I'll be there, I said. The meeting was held on Saturday afternoon, in the same living room where I had spent my childhood feeling invisible. But something was different this time. The usual confidence that permeated the house was gone, replaced by a heavy, anxious energy that I could feel the moment I walked in. My parents looked older than I remembered. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. My mother's usual poise seemed forced, her smile brittle. Marcus and Julian were already there, sitting on opposite ends of the couch like they couldn't stand to be near each other. Marcus was staring at his phone, his leg bouncing nervously. Julian was nursing a drink that probably wasn't his first. Nathan, thank you for coming, my father said, his voice lacking its usual authority. Sit down, we have a lot to discuss. I took my usual spot, the chair by the window, slightly removed from the center of the room, the spares chair. I'll get straight to the point, my father continued. Our family is facing a financial crisis. Julian's real estate company is in serious trouble. Marcus's tech venture is being forced into dissolution. And your mother and I, we've overextended ourselves trying to help. He paused, rubbing his eyes. The bottom line is that we need capital, a significant infusion of capital, or we're going to lose everything. The businesses, the house, everything we've built. The room was silent. How much? I asked, not because I didn't know. My intelligence networks had given me detailed figures weeks ago, but because I wanted to hear him say it. My father took a deep breath. Combined, across all our obligations, approximately $40 million. $40 million, the number hung in the air like a physical weight. We've approached traditional lenders, my mother said, but given the circumstances, they're not willing to extend credit. We've looked into private equity, but the terms they're offering are predatory. There is one option, Marcus spoke up, his voice carrying a hint of desperate hope. An investment firm that specializes in distressed assets. They're headquartered here in the city, very selective about their clients, but they've been known to structure deals that actually give the borrower a chance to recover. Julian nodded. We've already submitted an application. They're reviewing our case. What's the firm called? I asked, keeping my expression neutral. Apex Capital Partners, Marcus said. You probably haven't heard of them. They're pretty exclusive. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. Apex Capital Partners, the investment firm I had founded 8 years ago, the firm that bore my fingerprints on every deal, every strategy, every decision, even though my name appeared nowhere in the public-facing documents. They had applied to me for bailout money, they just didn't know it. Sounds promising, I said. When do you hear back? We have a meeting scheduled for next week, my mother replied. The founding partner agreed to see us personally. We're hoping that's a good sign. The founding partner, they meant Thomas Reed, the man I paid to be the public face of Apex while I made all the real decisions from behind the scenes. I hope it works out, I said. Is there anything I can do to help? My parents exchanged a glance that communicated volumes. Marcus let out a short, bitter laugh. Julian just shook his head. No offense, Nathan, my father said carefully, but this situation requires resources that are, well, beyond what we'd expect you to have access to. Your job at the electronics store. I'm a regional manager now, actually, I interjected. Got promoted last year. That's great, my mother said, with the same tone she might use to praise a child's finger painting. We're proud of you, but this situation needs millions of dollars, not, well, you understand. I understood perfectly. Even now, facing financial ruin, they couldn't imagine that I might be in a position to help. The narrative they had constructed about me was so powerful that reality couldn't penetrate it. Of course, I said, I understand completely. We talked for another hour, going over the details of their various disasters. I asked questions that I already knew the answers to, offered sympathy that I didn't entirely feel, and played my role with the same dedication I had maintained for years. When I left that evening, I called Thomas Reed. The Hartwell family meeting, I said. I want to be there. You, Thomas sounded surprised. You never attend client meetings. This one's different. Make the arrangements. I'll explain when I see you. Over the following week, I prepared meticulously. I had my legal team compile a comprehensive file on my family's financial situation, every debt, every asset, every liability, every decision that had led them to this point. I reviewed the documents my brothers had submitted to Apex, noting the optimistic projections and creative accounting that tried to make their situations look more salvageable than they were. I also gathered documentation of my own history, the college fund they had taken without my consent, the years of dismissive comments and casual cruelty, some of which had been captured in emails and text messages, the systematic exclusion from family decisions, family resources, family belonging. And I prepared what I was going to say. Every word, every pause, every revelation, I scripted it like a performance, because in a way, that's exactly what it would be, the final act of a play that had been running for 35 years. The meeting was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. in Apex Capital's conference room. The building itself was one I owned, a sleek downtown tower that I had acquired 3 years ago as part of a larger real estate portfolio. My family would walk into a building I owned, meet with a firm I controlled, and beg for money that I would decide whether to give them. The symbolism was not lost on me. I arrived early, dressed in a suit that cost more than my father's car. I positioned myself in a side room with a view of the conference room, watching through a one-way glass as my family arrived. They looked nervous but hopeful. My parents had dressed in their best clothes, projecting an image of respectability that they hoped would impress the investors. Marcus carried a leather portfolio stuffed with documents. Julian wore his most charming smile, the one he deployed when he needed something from someone. Thomas greeted them warmly, playing his role perfectly. He had no idea who they really were to me. I had kept that information to myself, but he knew this meeting was important enough that I had requested to be present. Thank you for coming, Thomas said, gesturing to the conference table. Please have a seat. My colleague will be joining us shortly to discuss your application. Your colleague, my father asked. I thought you were the managing partner. I am, Thomas confirmed, but our founder prefers to be present for meetings of this significance. He has final approval on all major investments. My family exchanged glances. A founder they had never heard of, never seen in any of the firm's public materials. They probably assumed it was some reclusive billionaire, the kind of shadowy figure who moved money around the globe without ever showing his face. They weren't entirely wrong. He'll be here momentarily, Thomas said. Can I get anyone coffee while we wait? I let them sit for exactly 7 minutes, long enough to build anticipation, not long enough to seem rude. Then I straightened my tie, took a deep breath, and walked into the conference room. The reaction was instantaneous. My mother's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. My father's expression cycled through confusion, recognition, and disbelief in the span of 2 seconds. Marcus actually laughed, a short, incredulous sound that he quickly suppressed. Julian just stared, his mouth slightly open. Good afternoon, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. Thank you for coming. No one spoke. I believe you know who I am, I continued, but allow me to formally introduce myself in this context. My name is Nathan Hartwell. I'm the founder and majority owner of Apex Capital Partners. I'm also the primary shareholder of this building and of approximately $300 million in other assets distributed across 17 companies, 43 properties, and various investment vehicles. The silence stretched on. I understand you're here seeking $40 million to address various financial obligations, I said, opening the folder in front of me. I've reviewed your applications in detail. Would you like my assessment? My father found his voice first. Nathan, what is this? Some kind of joke? No joke, this is a business meeting. You applied to my firm for investment. I'm here to discuss your application. But you, my mother shook her head. You work at an electronics store. You're a regional manager. How can you possibly? I do work at an electronics store, I acknowledged. About 4 hours a week, mostly for the employee discount. The rest of my time is spent managing this firm and my other business interests. That's impossible, Marcus said. You don't have the skills, the education, the skills I taught myself, the education I acquired on my own after you took my college fund. I met his eyes. The money I built from nothing while you were burning through investor capital and proving that expensive degrees don't guarantee competence. Marcus's face went red. This is insane, Julian said. You're telling us that while we've been building real businesses, you've been secretly becoming some kind of billionaire. Not quite a billionaire, yet give me another few years. I smiled slightly, and I wouldn't characterize what you've been building as real businesses. From what I can see in these documents, you've been building elaborate structures for burning other people's money. Now wait just a minute, my father started. I have the floor, I said, my voice carrying an authority that silenced him immediately. You'll have your opportunity to speak. I opened the folder and began laying out documents. Julian, your real estate portfolio is leveraged at 8-to-1. You have negative cash flow on 60% of your properties. You've been covering shortfalls by taking out new loans against existing assets, creating a debt spiral that was mathematically certain to collapse. The only question was when. Julian's face went pale. Marcus, your tech company has pivoted 7 times in 4 years. You've gone through $43 million in investor money without ever achieving product-market fit. Your current runway, based on the burn rate in these documents, is approximately 6 weeks. Your investors are already circling, and the terms of your Series C mean they can force a liquidation at their discretion. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. Mom, Dad, you've personally guaranteed loans totaling $12 million across both businesses. Your retirement accounts have been depleted. The house is mortgaged beyond its current market value. If either business formally defaults, and they will, you'll face personal bankruptcy. My parents sat frozen, the full scope of their situation laid out in brutal detail. The question you're probably asking yourselves, I continued, is how this happened. How did the smart ones, the gifted ones, the exceptional ones end up here? How did all that potential, all those advantages, all those resources lead to ruin? I leaned back in my chair. I'll tell you how. Arrogance. You were so certain of your own superiority that you never questioned your decisions. You never planned for failure because you couldn't imagine failing. You treated money like it was infinite because you'd never had to earn it, really earn it yourselves. That's not fair, my mother said weakly. We worked hard. You worked hard on the wrong things. You worked hard on appearances, on status, on maintaining the image of success. You didn't work hard on fundamentals, on sustainable growth, on the boring, unglamorous disciplines that separate real business people from pretenders. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. You know what I learned growing up in your shadow? I learned that being underestimated is a gift. When no one expects anything from you, you have freedom. Freedom to learn, to experiment, to fail quietly and try again. Freedom to build something real without the pressure of living up to impossible expectations. I turned back to face them. I also learned something about family. I learned that the word doesn't mean anything by itself. Family is supposed to be the people who support you, who believe in you, who want you to succeed. By that definition, you were never my family. You were just people I happened to share DNA with. My mother's eyes were glistening. My father looked like he was in shock. My brothers couldn't meet my gaze. So here's what's going to happen, I said, returning to my seat. I'm going to make you an offer, not because you deserve it, you don't, but because I believe in something you never understood, second chances. I pulled out a new set of documents. I will provide the $40 million you need to address your immediate obligations. In exchange, I will take controlling interest in both businesses. Julian, you'll stay on as an operator, but every decision will require my approval. Marcus, your company will be dissolved and its assets absorbed into one of my existing portfolio companies. You can have a job there if you want one, but you won't be in charge of anything. You're asking us to give up our businesses, Julian asked. I'm asking you to accept the consequences of your failures while being given a path forward. Most people in your situation don't get that. Most people lose everything and spend years trying to rebuild. I'm offering you a lifeline. The question is whether your pride will let you take it. Marcus shook his head slowly. You're enjoying this. You're enjoying watching us suffer. I considered his words. I'm not enjoying it, I said honestly. I thought I would. For years, I imagined this moment, the look on your faces when you realized who I actually was. I thought it would feel triumphant, vindicating. But sitting here, looking at you now, I mostly just feel tired. I sighed. You spent my entire childhood telling me I wasn't enough. You took my college fund to finance your dreams. You mocked me at every family gathering, treated me like a servant, used me as the punchline to jokes that everyone laughed at because laughing was easier than questioning. You made me feel invisible, worthless, disposable. I met each of their eyes in turn. And now here we are, the exceptional ones begging the spare for help, the gifted ones facing ruin while the simpleton holds the keys to salvation. How's that for irony? The room was silent, except for the hum of the building's HVAC system. You have 48 hours to decide, I said, standing up. Accept my terms and we'll begin restructuring immediately. Decline and I wish you the best of luck finding another solution. Thomas will see you out. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. The house, the one I grew up in, the one where I scrubbed toilets while Marcus and Julian had their laundry done by housekeepers. My parents looked up. I bought the mortgage 6 months ago. You've been paying me this whole time. If you default, and under your current trajectory, you will, the house becomes mine. Just something to consider as you make your decision. I left the conference room without looking back. They took the deal. Of course they took the deal. What choice did they have? The alternative was losing everything, becoming the cautionary tale they had always assumed I would be. Whatever humiliation they felt, accepting help from the spare was preferable to public ruin. The papers were signed 3 days later, in the same conference room where I had revealed myself. Thomas handled the formalities while I watched from my office, monitoring the proceedings through the security feed. My family signed where they were told to sign, initialed where they were told to initial, and by the end of the afternoon, I had control of everything they had built. The restructuring began immediately. Julian's real estate portfolio was assessed by my team, and we began the process of selling underwater properties and consolidating the viable ones into a more sustainable operation. Marcus's tech company was dissolved, its intellectual property transferred to one of my existing companies, its employees offered positions if they wanted them. My parents' house was taken off the foreclosure track once the deal was finalized. I could have let them twist, could have enjoyed watching them pack up their memories and move into some apartment. But I had meant what I said. I wasn't interested in their suffering. I was interested in justice, and justice had been served the moment they were forced to acknowledge who I had become. Over the following months, I kept my distance while maintaining control. Weekly reports from my management team kept me informed of progress, but I didn't insert myself into day-to-day operations. Julian, to his credit, seemed to be taking the situation seriously, showing up on time, following protocols, learning from the systems I had put in place. Marcus was more resistant, his pride chafing against the reality of working for his younger brother, but he eventually settled into a routine. My parents I saw only occasionally, at holidays and family events that I now attended not out of obligation, but out of a strange curiosity. They treated me differently now, with a deference that bordered on fear, their former condescension completely absent. I wasn't sure if this was better. At least when they looked down on me, I knew where I stood. Nathan, my mother said at Christmas dinner, 6 months after the deal was signed, we never thanked you properly for what you did for saving us. You don't need to thank me, I replied. It was a business decision. It was more than that, and we both know it. She reached across the table to touch my hand. We were wrong about you. We were wrong about so many things. I looked at her hand on mine, remembering all the times she had patted my head dismissively, brushed aside my achievements, reminded me that I wasn't like the twins. Yes, I said, you were. She withdrew her hand, hurt flickering across her face. I'm not saying this to be cruel, I continued. I'm saying it because it's true. You were wrong about me, and I spent my childhood paying the price for your assumptions. I can't pretend that didn't happen just because the power dynamic has shifted. So what happens now? My father asked. We just go on like this, walking on eggshells around you forever. I considered the question. I don't know, I admitted. I've spent so long preparing for this moment that I never really thought about what comes after. Revenge is a funny thing. It gives you purpose, direction, something to work toward, but once you have it. I trailed off, not sure how to finish the thought. Once you have it, my father said quietly, you realize it doesn't fill the hole you thought it would. I looked at him with surprise. It was perhaps the most perceptive thing he had ever said to me. No, I agreed, it doesn't. The years that followed were strange, liminal, neither the triumph I had imagined nor the closure I had hoped for. Julian's real estate business, under my oversight, actually became profitable. We shed the bad assets, focused on fundamentals, and built something sustainable. He eventually earned back enough autonomy that my involvement became more advisory than supervisory. I wouldn't say we became friends, but we developed a working relationship that wasn't actively hostile. Marcus was a harder case. His ego never fully recovered from the fall, and after 2 years of working in a subordinate role at my company, he left to try something new. I didn't stop him. I even gave him a severance package he probably didn't deserve, and the last I heard, he was involved in some kind of consulting business that seemed to be modestly successful. My parents aged rapidly after the crisis. The stress had taken a physical toll, and my father's health in particular declined over the following years. He died 4 years after that meeting in the conference room, a heart attack that came suddenly one winter morning. At his funeral, I found myself crying, not the performative tears I had forced at family gatherings over the years, but real grief, surprising in its intensity. I wasn't mourning the father I had actually had. I was mourning the father I had wanted, the one who might have seen me clearly if circumstances had been different. My mother lived another 3 years, gradually softening in her old age. Our conversations during her final months were more honest than anything we had shared before. She admitted her failures, acknowledged the harm she had caused, asked for forgiveness she wasn't sure she deserved. I don't know if I can forgive you, I told her one afternoon, sitting beside her hospital bed, but I've stopped hating you. I think that's the best I can offer. That's enough, she said. That's more than enough. She died 2 weeks later, and I paid for her funeral just as I had paid for my father's. The expenses were trivial given my wealth, but the act felt significant somehow, a final gesture of responsibility for people who had failed to be responsible for me. Today, I am 43 years old. My net worth has crossed $500 million, though I stopped paying attention to the exact figure years ago. I am married to a woman named Sarah who knows my full history and loves me not despite it, but because of it. We have 2 children, a boy and a girl, who will never wonder whether they are wanted. I still run Apex Capital, though I've delegated most of the daily operations to a team I trust. I serve on several nonprofit boards, funding programs that support first-generation college students and young people from difficult family situations. I am trying, in whatever small way I can, to give others the chances that I was denied. When I think about my family now, my original family, the one that shaped me through their neglect, I feel something complicated, not forgiveness exactly, not anger anymore, something more like understanding, tinged with sorrow. They were flawed people who made flawed choices. They were products of their own upbringings, their own fears, their own limitations. They hurt me badly, but they were also hurt by circumstances I never fully understood. This doesn't excuse what they did. It doesn't erase the years of invisibility, the theft of my college fund, the systematic dismissal of my worth. But it helps me hold the complexity of it all, the understanding that people can be both wrong and human, both harmful and deserving of some compassion. I used to think revenge was the answer. I used to think that if I could just make them see what they had missed, feel what they had caused me to feel, I would find peace. And for a moment, in that conference room, watching their faces as they realized who I had become, for a moment, I did feel something like peace. But it didn't last, because revenge, it turns out, is not the same as healing. It's a single moment of satisfaction in exchange for years of focused bitterness. It's a sugar rush that leaves you emptier than before. The real healing came later. It came from building a life that had nothing to do with proving them wrong, a life of genuine connection, meaningful work, love that didn't come with conditions. It came from learning that I was enough, not because I had accumulated wealth or power, but simply because I existed and deserved to be seen. Last week, my son asked me about my childhood. He's 10 now, old enough to notice that I don't have grandparents on my side, old enough to wonder about the gap in our family tree. I thought about how to answer. I didn't want to burden him with the full weight of my history, but I also didn't want to lie. My family was complicated, I finally said. They weren't always kind to me, and I spent a long time feeling like I didn't belong. but I found my own way, and now I have you and your sister and your mom. That's my real family." He nodded slowly, processing this information with the earnest seriousness that 10-year-olds bring to important conversations. "Is that why you always tell us that we're enough just as we are?" he asked. I felt my throat tighten. "Yes," I said, "that's exactly why." He hugged me then, a quick, fierce embrace that communicated more than words could have. And in that moment, holding my son in the life I had built from nothing, I felt something I had never felt in my parents' house. I felt like I belonged. The spare had become the heir, not just to wealth and power, but to a future of his own design. And that, more than any revenge, more than any vindication, was the victory that actually mattered. If you are new, drop a comment below. Type karma if you believe what goes around comes around. Type the spare one if Nathan's story gave you chills. Type next story if you're ready for another satisfying one. Your comments and likes tell me you want more of these stories, so don't be shy. Let me hear from you. We're just getting started, fam. Now, are you ready for the next one? Stay locked in, stay subscribed, stay with us.